All right, so thanks everyone for joining us. Like Rachel said, I am Diana Diggs. I'm a Huron Pines AmeriCorps member serving at Michigan Nature Association, or M&A as we usually call it. And I'm joined tonight with some of the other M&A staff. So from the stewardship team, we have Rachel, Rob, Zach, and Nancy. And from the outreach team, we have Julie on the call with us. So in case anyone is not familiar with M&A, we are a nonprofit membership-based organization with over 180 nature sanctuaries throughout the state of Michigan, with a mission to acquire, protect, and maintain natural areas that contain examples of Michigan's endangered and threatened flora, fauna, and their habitats. So just a little technical thing first before we get started. We have everyone on mute in order to avoid any background noise, but we do encourage you to write any questions in the chat box. If you're on your phone, you can press the 3 dots that are highlighted in the green box here, and then hit the chat button, which is shown in the blue box. If you're joining us from the computer, you can click on the chat box that's highlighted in yellow there, and we'll have a couple breaks for questions. But if we're not able to get to your question tonight, we'll include them in a follow-up email to everyone. And even after the webinar, if you think of another question, feel free to email myself or Rachel with those. All right, so this is kind of what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to learn how to use a dichotomous key. We're going to look at some of the basic plant morphology and some of the structures that are used primarily in plant identification. So this is going to include the growth habit, the roots, leaves, stems, buds, bark, and a little bit on flowers. And then we're going to talk about a practice assignment that we have for you guys to kind of get more familiar with the terminology that we're going to cover. And we'll have a few Q&A sessions throughout the whole presentation. So hopefully you're here because you want to learn how to identify plants. So there's 3 methods kind of for plant identification. And the first one is just to ask someone who knows the flora of the region really well. But the way that we've set up this presentation is designed to help you in the next 2 areas, which are comparison methods. So comparing your unknown plant with pictures, drawings, and or descriptions in the field guides or online resources. And then the third one being using taxonomic keys. So these are devices for identifying an unknown plant through the process of elimination. So in order to use 2 and 3, you have to know a lot of the botanical terminology. And I'll send in the follow-up email a bunch of the resources to you all that you can either get online or some of them that you can purchase. But this one right here, the plant identification terminology, it's one of my favorite plant books. I'm pretty sure it's the reason I actually finished my master's degree. It's a really great book. It gives drawings for all the terms and definitions. So it's very helpful when you're trying to learn the terminology. So next, we're just going to look at a certain type of taxonomic key, which is the dichotomous key. So this is where you have a sequence of choices between 2 pairs of contrasting statements, and these are called a couplet. And as you go through these couplets, you identify the unknown object by the process of elimination. So we're just going to do a really simple dichotomous key just so that you can understand kind of how it works. So I'm going to just go through this first one. We're going to pretend like it doesn't have the name on it. So it's an unknown candy. And I would go 1A, candy is chewy. 1B, candy is hard. So maybe I've tried it. I know that it's chewy. I would go here and go to number 2. 2A, candy is wrapped, or 2B, candy is not wrapped. So since the candy is wrapped, I would go to number 3, third couplet. 3A candy is rounded or 3B candy is not rounded. Since the candy is rounded, I would go to number 4. 4A wrapper is all white, or 4B wrapper is not white. So it's not all white. So I would go to 5. 5A wrapper is brown and white, or 5B wrapper is not brown and white. So since it is brown and white, I would pick 5A, Tutus rollis. So a lot of scientific names are Latin. They sound kind of funny, but a lot of times they describe to us different information about the plant. So to give yourself a little bit of practice in using a dichotomous key, go ahead and pick either one of the other candies, and I'm going to give everyone just a little bit of time to key that out. Just make sure you remember what number you got to, so you know if you got to the correct thing. All right, hopefully everyone's had a chance to work through that. And if you did the lollipops, hopefully you got to 11A, Moranus moranus, commonly known as dum-dums. And if you did the Jolly Rancher, hopefully you got to 9B, Joyous Rancheria. So that's how just a simple dichotomous key works. And you can use, there's some keys that are really complex and some that are a little more simple. We're going to give you some examples of some simpler ones that can kind of get you used to using a key. So next, I just want to go over a few of the tips for using dichotomous keys. So first one is to read all the choices. So you'll notice as we were going through the couplets that I read out the entire sentence. So sometimes in a key, it won't just be one characteristic that you're comparing. You'll have multiple ones. So you want to read out that whole statement to make sure that you're getting the best match to the plant that you're trying to identify. Number 2 is you're probably going to need to look up terms. I still do all the time. The terminology that we're going to cover tonight isn't even close to the amount of terminology that there is. So most field guides or keys will have their own glossary or dictionary in them. And if you get to a word that you don't know, just look it up. That is how you know that you're getting the best answer. Number 3 is rulers are your friends. So another is that some keys and field guides have them in the back. And a ruler can help you because sometimes in a key, it's gonna say down to even millimeters difference in maybe leaf size or something along that line. So for number 4, you want to look at the plant or the organism that you're looking at collectively. So you want to take an average of the entire organism, of as much of it as you can see. You don't want to look at one leaf. Inevitably, you look at just one part of the plant, and it's going to be the one part that just is kind of weird and it doesn't fit with the key very well. So make sure you're taking an average of everything. So next we're going to dive into the morphology of a plant. So the morphology is the study of the form or the shape of an organism or part of the organism. So this part shows the progression of the parts that make up the morphology of a plant. And the main parts that we're going to look at today are the organs. But we do look at the organism as a whole when we're trying to identify the plant. And that is called the habit. So the habit of the plant is the overall or general appearance of a plant or the growth form. And there are four main types of these. So the first one is herbaceous, or sometimes called an herb. So these are plants that are not woody, so the stem dies back to the ground each year. The second one are vines. These are woody plants with a non-self-supporting stem, so it typically wraps around itself or other objects for support. Next is shrub. So this is a woody plant with more than one main stem and is typically shorter than a tree. And the last one, the last habit type is tree, which is a large woody plant with a single main stem or trunk. So sometimes what you might see in a key, it might say subshrub. And so some plants, depending on the environment that they're in, if they're getting a lot of nutrients and sunlight and water, it might look more like a tree. But if it's in another environment, it might look more like a shrub. And so sometimes you'll see subshrub written in a key. So now let's go back one step from organism and talk about the organ systems of a plant. So plants have two types of organ systems. The first are the vegetative organs. So these are what are not used for sexual reproduction. These are for the growth and well-being of the plant. And then we have the reproductive organs of the plant. So these are used for sexual reproduction. So these organs are the flowers, fruits, and seeds. So we're going to primarily focus on the vegetative organs today because you can't always see the reproductive organs. The only time you're going to see those is when the plant is in its fruit or flowering stage. But you can see at least some of the vegetative organs throughout the year. Another part of that is that the reproductive organs a lot of times are really small and difficult to see without magnification. So they can be kind of complicated to see in the field and not that great for field identification sometimes. So the three vegetative organs are the roots, leaves, and stems. First is the roots. So these are the main below ground organ of the plant body. Their purpose is to absorb water and nutrients and anchor the plant in place. And typically in plant identification, what we look at for the roots to help with IDing is the type of root system that it has. So this is a taproot system, which is a root system with a main root axis and smaller branching roots. So not only is this system called a taproot system, but this main root is also called the taproot. Next, we have the fibrous roots. So this root system is characterized by many branching roots that are approximately the same size and diameter. So this is the type of root system that we typically see in grasses and sedges. So the next main part of the vegetative organs is the leaf. And the leaf is the principal photosynthetic organ of the plant body, and it has three basic parts. The first one is the blade. So this is the broad, flat, photosynthetic portion of the leaf. So this is where the chloroplasts are that allow the plant to do photosynthesis and produce its own food. Next, we have the petiole. This is the stalk that supports the blade of the leaf, and connects it to the stem. Next is the stipules. So these are often leaf-like structures that occur in pairs or surround the base of the petiole on the stem. So not all plants have stipules. And another thing about it is that sometimes a plant will lose its stipules throughout the growing season. So maybe it has stipules at the beginning of spring, and by fall, it's lost its stipules. And not all leaves have all three of those structures. And so botanists have terms for those conditions as well. So this first one, when the leaf does not have a petiole and it attaches directly to the stem, it's what we call sessile. So here you can see in the goldenrod, it has a sessile leaf. It directly attaches to the stem without a petiole there. There's also one called a clasping base. So the base of the blade here extends kind of in these horns around the stem, and that is known as a clasping base, which we see on our New England aster in the fall. There are three basic leaf types. So we have broad leaves, we have needle-like leaves. So needle-like leaves, or sometimes we'll just see them called needles, are generally what we see in pines, trees like that. And then scale-like leaves are what we see in junipers. So this is going to be one of the first big divisions in a key. Most plants are going to fall under the broadleaf category. So needle-like and scale-like have much less to choose from. So they're going to try and narrow those out right at the beginning. So a lot of times that's one of those first couplets that you'll see, is to segregate those different ones. So next we have leaf shape. The first one is cordate. So that is a heart-shaped leaf. Next is deltoid, which is a triangular shaped leaf. And then we have ovate, which is an egg-shaped leaf. So these are just some of the most common leaf shapes, but there are lots of leaf shapes. So this is just from one key, one guide, all the different leaf shapes that it uses to classify that variety. So that's one of the reasons it's really important to look up those words that you don't know. So you might know scale-like, but you might not know what obovata means. So you would want to look that up if you came across it in the key. Next, we have leaf margins. So the first one is entire. So when we talk about margin, we're talking about the edge of the leaf blade. So this leaf edge is smooth. It's not toothed, notched, or divided. Next, we have toothed. So the leaf edge has small lobes or points along the margin, or it is bearing teeth. So sometimes they're rounded, sometimes they can be pointed. Tooth can have different looks to it. And then we have lobe. So this projection, it's larger than a tooth, and this is the lobe. And then the indented part here is the sinus. And these lobes, or larger projections, they can be rounded or they can be pointed. And this is one of the biggest distinctions between the two big groups of oaks. So red oaks are going to have these rounded lobes, and things in the white oak part are going to have the pointed lobes. So one thing to remember about shape, margin, or some other leaf characteristics is that it might not always be obvious. They might not look exactly the same, and that can be due to environmental factors. So stress species can look different. One of the things that is unique about plants is that if they don't get enough nutrients or water, unlike wildlife who can just move and try and find what they need, plants are rooted to the ground. They have to stay there. So their morphology, the shape of their organs, will actually change in response to their environment at times. So this is just another example of the vast amount of not only variety there is in leaf margins, but what you might find in a key or field guide in terms of how they describe those leaf margins. All right, so we're gonna do our first poll. If you could launch that, Rachel. So are all these photos the same plant species?
I don't know if you can see, Dan, it looks like we have 16 of 19 who have voted, and I don't know if some of those are like Zach and Rob. So
yeah, I say go for it.
Okay, so I will end the poll here. And sharing the results.
All right, so it looks like most people said they are not the same plant species, and it's kind of a tricky one because they are. So this is all actually poison ivy. And that is just one of the things to show that much variation can happen within the same species. I will say poison ivy is one of the ones that tends to seem to be more prone to that. Not everything is quite as complicated as it is, but there are certain characteristics that all of these photos share, and kind of as we go through tonight, hopefully you'll pick up on what the actual similarities are in these photos and why this is the same species, even if at first glance it doesn't quite look like it. All right, so next we're going to talk about leaf veins. So a vein is a specialized tissue structure that transports water and nutrients throughout the plant body. And some leaves have this main large central vein called the midrib that runs the length of the blade. And leaf venation is the pattern that the veins form on the blade of the leaf. So we're going to look a little more at some of these venation types. So first is parallel venation. So these are where the main veins are all about the same size and run more or less parallel from the base to the apex or tip of the leaf. This is really common in those grasses, sedges, and rushes. Parallel venation is generally what we see with them. So next is pinnate venation. So this is where there is a strong single midrib, and it gives rise to these smaller secondary veins. So American beech is a really good example of this pinnate venation. Next, we have palmate. So this is where several main veins that are all about the same size arise from a common point at the tip of the petiole and spread across the leaf blade. So just like your fingers all arise from your palm, it's the same way the veins spread out from the petiole. So this smilax here, or greenbrier, here's the tip of that petiole, and these veins all arise from that common point. The next one is reticulate or netted. So this is where all the main veins are about the same size and form a network or reticulum in the leaf blade. So I like to think of this one kind of as if you were to look at a map of a city, you would have still kind of maybe some thicker highways and maybe some state highways. But then you also have all these tiny little roads in between that kind of give it this netted look to it. So hackberries have this really characteristic reticulum to the leaf blade. So we're ready for the next poll. So I'm going to give you a few moments to look and see the characteristics of the leaf. So think about some of those ones that we just looked at. Is it entire margin, tooth margined? Does it have a petiole or not?
All right, Dan, it looks like we've got 78% of people, so I will
Sounds good.
end and share.
All right, it looks like most people said D, and you would be correct. It has this red bud. The leaf has an entire margin. It has a petiole. It has a cordate or heart-shaped leaf, and it is palmately veined. So good job. All right. And we are going to move on to the first question break. Rachel, do we have any questions in the chat box?
We actually don't, but if somebody has something they've just been itching to know, please, we'll give you a few seconds to type that in the chat box. Greg Bodker is asking, are we going to send out these slides? And I believe the answer is yes to that.
Yes.
We'll send an email, a follow-up email with those resources that Diana's been talking about and the slides. Okay, so Becky Kenny is asking if the stipules have a function.
The stipules do not have a function that we're aware of. Last I heard from someone who was a better authority on that than myself. So I don't know if any new research has come out, but last I heard of it, we did not understand what their function was.
The mysteries of botany. And then
yes.
Paul,
so someone wants a research project.
Right, yeah. You could spend 7 years and get a PhD in
stipules.
And then second question, and then we will take more questions at the next question break. Paul Messing is asking, is parallel venation synonymous with a dicot?
Parallel venation is generally more for monocots. So monocots are generally those grasses and grass-like plants, grasses, sedges, rushes, and dicots have a little bit more than what we're getting into. Dicots generally have those other forms of venation that we were talking about.
All right.
All right. We will move on then. So next we're going to talk about stems. So the stem is the organ that supports the plant. So it holds out the leaves, the flowers, and the fruit. This is important because the leaves need to be able to be out in order to get sunlight and do photosynthesis. And then the flowers are held out in order to help attract pollinators. And the fruit, it's helpful to have it out because that attracts animals that will take it and transport it so those seeds get dispersed other places. So the stem can be broken down into different sections. So first area we're going to look at is what is called the node. So this is the point on the stem that the leaf arises from. And then you have a consecutive node, and the space in between those two consecutive nodes is called the internode. So next we have just a few of the stem features that we're going to take a look at. The first one being the leaf scar. So the leaf scar is the scar that remains on the stem after the leaf falls off. And then we have the buds. So buds are an underdeveloped shoot or flower. So these are growing points along the stems that will either develop into branches or a flower or flower clusters. And we have two different types of buds. So the first one is the terminal bud, which is located at the extreme apex or tip of the stem. Next, we have the axillary or lateral bud. So here we have the stem and the petiole, and this angle formed between the petiole and the plant stem is called the leaf axil. And this bud that sits there is called the axillary or lateral bud. So this bud is located in the leaf axil and is just above the attachment point of the leaf. So just above that petiole. And those buds can be covered in bud scales. So these are small modified leaves that cover and protect the bud. So we have a few different types to show you here. This doesn't cover the range of bud scales, but this is just some of the common ones. So in the tulip tree, you see this two-scaled one, which is called valvate. So it's meeting cleanly at the edges without overlapping, so two-scaled. This one is imbricate, so the sugar maple has imbricate scales, so one unit overlaps with the other one, like the shingles of a roof. Or like you see in witch hazel, you can have a naked bud, so there is no scales on this bud. Another feature of stems that we look at for identification is the lenticels. So this is a small pore in the stem of the woody plant that allows gas exchange between the atmosphere and the internal tissues of the plant. All right, so we're ready for the next poll. So what is structure number 4? It looks like we have most people have answered now.
All right, I will end and share.
All right, it looks like most people answered a node, and that is correct. So the node is where the point on the stem that the leaf arises from. So the node, I can understand where stipules was confusing now that I look a little closer, because these are the stipules and then this is the node where the leaf is arising from. So next we're going to talk about leaf arrangement. So this is how the leaves are arranged along the stem. This is a really key characteristic used in identification. So the first type of leaf arrangement that we're going to talk about is alternate. So this is when there is one leaf arising from the node. So cherry trees are a really good example of alternate leaf arrangement. Next we have opposite, which is when two leaves are arising per node, and lilac trees have that opposite leaf arrangement. Next is whorled. So this is when there are 3 or more leaves per node. And here we see these 4 leaves arising from the node in the Culver's root. The next is fascicled. So this is when the leaves are clustered and arising from the apex of a short spur shoot. So right here, so fascicled is a lot of times the arrangement that you'll see with like pine needles, but we also see it on this ginkgo biloba here. Next, we have basal leaf arrangement. So this is where the leaves are positioned at or arising from the base of the stem. This is really characteristic for dandelions. It's also primarily the type of arrangement that you'd be more likely to see with herbaceous or non-woody plants. One of the ones that is invasive that we have around here is the garlic mustard. So they actually overwinter with just this basal leaf arrangement or basal rosette until the rest of the plant grows in spring. All right, and the next poll. So what is the leaf arrangement on this one? Alternate, basal, opposite, or whorled? All right, it looks like we've got pretty much everyone has voted, and you are all correct. It is an opposite leaf arrangement. That is the typical leaf arrangement of dogwoods. And in the next webinar, we'll go over a little bit more of those tips for different families have specific leaf arrangements in them, and that will help you kind of narrow things down when you're trying to key things out. So if you were to look at a stem without the leaves, you can still actually tell the leaf arrangement from it. So this is a really good tip for in winter. So even though this stem doesn't have leaves, you can still determine the arrangement by looking at either the leaf scar. So remember, that's where the leaf has fallen off and left this scar on the stem. Or you can tell by looking at the axillary or lateral buds. So if there's one leaf scar per node here, one here, you know it has an alternate leaf arrangement. Or if it's one bud at the node and another bud, one bud at the next node, you know it has an alternate leaf arrangement. So if you were to look at the stem of this hawthorn tree, you might at first think, oh, it has a fascicled leaf arrangement. But if you looked closer, you kind of took the average of the whole organism like we talked about, you might see that, wait, it has an alternate leaf arrangement as well. So not all plants do this, but some will have more than one leaf arrangement on the same plant within the same species. So that's one of the reasons it's so important to kind of take inventory of as much of the plant as you can. A lot of times when you see this, it can be because one leaf arrangement is more common in the older or more mature part of the plant, and there's another leaf arrangement at the parts of the plants where it's still really growing a lot. So next we have box elder, and if anyone wants to type in the chat box a guess for what the leaf arrangement is on this one, feel free to give everyone a few seconds to do that. But really this one is kind of a trick question because we haven't really covered it yet. But it's to lead into kind of what we're going to discuss next, which is simple versus compound leaves. So the leaf on this plant is actually this whole part here. So instead of just one blade, like we've been looking at on the leaf, this has 3 leaflets. So, but you can still tell the leaf arrangement. So this is one leaf, and then you have the other leaf here. So that would be 2 leaves at one node. So it has an opposite leaf arrangement. So that kind of leads into the discussion of simple versus compound leaves. So a simple leaf has one blade, although it can be toothed or lobed, and a compound leaf has more than one blade, and each one of those blades is called a leaflet. So we looked at some of the terminology for the simple leaf already. So we're just going to talk about a couple terms used for compound leaves. So like we said, it has the leaflets on this instead of the one entire blade. And the part that is attached, that the leaflet's attached to, is called the rachis. So the leaf still has the petiole that attaches the compound leaf to the stem, but it also has this other axis called a rachis that the leaflet's attached to. So what do you do if you have a plant and you're not sure if it has simple or compound leaves? So if you were to see this, how would you know that this is the leaf and this is not just another stem with single leaves coming off of it? So this is when looking for those axillary buds is important. So here we look at this part and we can see the bud between the petiole and the stem here. So this whole part is the leaf. And if we look here where the leaflets attach to the rachis, there are no buds there. So we know that this is a compound leaf. And this is just kind of to emphasize that. On the compound leaf, you've got the bud here and no bud along the rachis. Next, we're going to look at a few types of compound leaves. The first one is once-pinnately compound. So this is where the leaflets arise directly from the rachis. Then we have bi-pinnately compound leaves. So this is where the leaflets arise from branches. So there's these side branches off the rachis, and that is where the leaflets come off of. Not off the rachis, but off the side branches from the rachis, which is typical of this Kentucky coffee tree. Next, we have palmately compound leaves. So this is where the leaflets arise from the common point at the apex of the petiole. So just like we had with palmate venation, they all arise from that one point. and radiate out like the fingers from your palm. Next, we have trifoliate leaves. So these are compound leaves with 3 leaflets. So this is the one we talked about before. It's got that opposite leaf arrangement. This is box elder. And we call it trifoliate because that keeps us all from arguing with whether it is a pinnately compound leaf or a palmately compound leaf. All right, so let's do the next poll. So what kind of compound leaf is this? Looks like most people are saying palmately compound. All right, we got 77% voted. 93% said palmately compound, and that is correct. Palmate compound leaves are what we have on our wild lupin. So another characteristic that we use for identification is bark, which is also really helpful in winter. So we're not going to cover all the different types of bark, but I just want to show you that there are distinctions between the species. So 2 characteristics to focus on with bark is to look at the pattern or texture as well as the color. So here on the black cherry tree, on the young bark, it's smooth and it has these really prominent lenticels. And then as it gets older, it turns darker gray and gets scaly. And a lot of people call this the burnt potato chip bark. Next, we have the northern hackberry. So this is a more tan or brown bark, and it has these warts or kind of corky ridges along it when it gets mature. The American beech has this really smooth bark, and it's that light gray. It does get these kind of pox marks as it gets older, but it's going to remain fairly smooth. It's not going to get warty like the hackberry. So those are just a few of the examples for bark. All right, do we have any questions before we move on to the last bit?
So we don't have any questions, and I actually might suggest that we skip this question break so we can get through the flower stuff, and so folks can leave at 8 if they'd like to.
Sounds good. All right, so going back to the beginning when we talked about the 2 different types of organ systems, we're just going to briefly touch on those reproductive organs. So those are the ones that are used for sexual reproduction, and they are the flowers, fruits, and the seeds. And we're just going to focus just for a minute on the flowers. So the flower is the basic reproductive unit of the plant, and it has 4 basic parts. The sepals, which are the outer set of the floral parts that protect the flower when it's in bud as it's developing. Next, we have the petals. These are usually the larger, more colorful part of the flower because they're used to attract animals for pollination. Then we have the stamens. So this is the part that produces the pollen. And then the carpel or pistil. And this is the part of the plant that accepts the pollen and where pollination occurs. So flowers can be divided into 3 groups. Regular flowers, so these are radially symmetrical flowers, meaning they have multiple planes of symmetry that pass through the center of the flower. And that is versus irregular flowers, which are bilaterally symmetrical, and only have one plane of symmetry that passes through the center of the flower. The third one is indistinguishable flowers. So these either have no visible petal-like parts, or the parts are so small that it's difficult to make them out in number or arrangement. So this system is what's used in the NEWCOMB'S Wildflower Guide. It's a really good beginner guide. It's not a dichotomous key. It does have a key, but it's a lot less complicated than the key in, say, like the Michigan flora. So it's a good book to start getting used to identifying flowers. And this is kind of the system that they use. So we've already discussed plant type and leaf type. So all we have to discuss to be able to use this key now is this flower type. And he's recognized 8 flower types. So the irregular flowers, the indistinguishable ones, and then the regular flowers that either have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 or more parts to them. So we're not going to cover all of these 8. We're just going to cover a few of the more common ones. And when we talk about the number of parts, we're focusing on the number of petals and sepals generally that the plant has. So a flower with 3 regular parts, so we've got 3 petals, 3 sepals, and 3 lines of symmetry. Next, we have the flower with 4 regular parts. These flowers with 4 petals that kind of have this cross-like shape are really characteristic of flowers in the mustard family. So this is the field mustard here. It's a regular flower, so it has multiple planes of symmetry. Next, we have the flowers with 5 regular parts. So we can see the 5 petals and the 5 sepals on this loose stripe here. Since it is a regular flower, it also has multiple planes of symmetry through the center. Sunflowers, or anything in the sunflower or aster family, commonly have 7 or more regular parts. So this one's the black-eyed Susan, and it has multiple planes of symmetry. Versus the irregular flowers, so these are the ones that are bilaterally symmetrical and only have that one line of symmetry down the center. So this spotted touch me not is a good example of an irregular flower. Next, we have the indistinguishable flowers. So these are the ones that don't have visible petal parts, or the parts are so small it's hard to count them or see them. And generally you would need some magnification to see these flowers. So this is the flowering stalk for the flowers that have the stamens on them for the bur oak. So this is multiple flowers here. So they're really tiny and hard to see just one individual flower. And then here, this is just the styles that are clustered on top of a short, thin stalk in the leaf axil. So this is the other flowers of the bur oak. This is the one that will create the fruit. And it's right here between the stem and the petiole in that axil. All right, so our last poll before we have the final Q&A. What type of flower? It looks like we have 72% voted, with 92% saying flower with 5 regular parts. And that is correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals and sepals on the strawberry plant there. So I'll send this information out tomorrow. But like we said, there's a lot of terminology, and really, like any other skill, plant identification is a skill. Practice is what helps. So we've kind of written up a practice assignment. And basically, you just want to find about 5 plants and answer as many of these questions as you can. And then you can either use the guide for trees that I'll send out tomorrow, or if you have the wildflower guide and you want to give some herbaceous plants a try, you can use that one. Woody plants, I think, is a little bit easier to start off with. But if you wanted to give some flowers a try, NEWCOMB'S is a good place to start. So basically, you're just going to identify some of the questions that we've talked about tonight. What's the venation? What's the leaf arrangement? That sort of thing. And then we will have some Q&A sessions between now and the next webinar. That way you have a chance to kind of practice some of this terminology. And then if you have any questions, you can get on one of these Zoom Q&A sessions with Rachel and I. And we can help try and answer your questions. If you have a plant that you've tried to key out or tried to use a field guide to identify and you're unsure, before the Q&A, you can send us pictures of the different parts and characteristics of the plant, and then we can help you identify it. And I'll send more information out about this in the follow-up email. And do we have any more questions?
Woohoo! Made it right under the radar.
Made it just in time.
We knew it was a ton of information to cover. So well done, everyone, sticking with us. Yeah, so please, we don't have any more questions at the moment, but you know, that's understandable. Diana just gave you a ton to think about. So if you do, we're happy to stick around for a couple extra minutes and answer anything immediate. But you know, we're available afterwards and throughout the weeks between now and the next webinar on. Well, I don't remember the date right now. Basically, three weeks from now, right, Diana? 3 Thursdays.
Yeah, 3 Thursdays from now.
Perfect.
I think it's the 12th of November.
That sounds
November 12th. Right. At 7 again.
Great.
Hi, this is Greg, and you put a lot of work into this, and I wanted to thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Becky. Nicely done, Diana. We've been waiting to show off her expertise. We were hoping it could be in the field, but this is pretty good too.
We may do.
Yeah, for sure. Wonderful. Well, oh, you know, I was going to point out on that last slide where Diana was showing kind of offering to send pictures, or if you wanted to send pictures to us, this was a great example of, this is all the same plant. These are all pictures that Diana took of the same plant. So kind of that zoomed out, more of the growth habit. And then she's got the stipule, you know, turned around the flower to see the stipules. You got the front view with the petals. You've got a ruler with, I believe looks like a seed, right, Diana? Yeah. So this is kind of a great, like, if you're ever trying to ID a plant, once you get home and maybe, you know, you can't take a sample, yeah, taking as many different pictures as you can, all sorts of angles is really.
Or if you want to ask someone what it is, this is helpful when people ask us what a plant is versus one blurry picture.
Yes. Sometimes we can do the one blurry one.
Sometimes.
Not always. So, all right, I'm still not seeing any questions, Diana, so I think you've thoroughly exhausted everyone. And Yeah, we very much look forward to seeing everyone for part 2, which is kind of going into more field ID of specific species. I think with a focus on invasives, you know, invasive plants throughout the seasons, and then sort of comparing them to some of the lookalikes.
If they have some native lookalikes.
So I realized that this was a introduction, if you will, to the various terminology, but the next one, the next webinar, will that be more like a step-by-step process to work through the, you did the, what was it called?
Dichotomous key.
Right. So that it looks like it's the key, but, or the process. Will you have examples of that? Or?
So I'll send you all the key tomorrow. And if you want to, you know, the whole point kind of for the practice assignment would be to go and find some plants and take the key and key through that yourself and kind of get some practice. If you wanted to send pictures or take, you know, a bit of a stem or something and bring that to one of the Q&A sessions, we could key some things out together. Yeah, that is generally something we would kind of try and do more in the field. Since we can't do it together, that's kind of what that practice assignment is a little bit more for.
And then
generally, if I was teaching this in person, I would be handing you out stems of things and we would key things out together, but it's kind of hard to do that in a virtual format. So.
And then you had a slide in the beginning where you had 3 different books.
Mm-hmm.
Which do you need all 3, or which were the ones that were like that start off showing that
right.
process?
So this is a new, we've been using a different
like
one.
slide 2 or 3.
Yeah, I wish I could just quickly get there, but bear with me. So I'll send you the DNR one. So it's just like maybe a 25, 30 page handout that they have on their website. And I'll send y'all that as an attachment tomorrow. I think that's a really good one to start off with, and it's free. If you want to use the NEWCOMB'S because you want to try some herbaceous stuff, not just woodies, that's probably a good key to start off with. And then the other ones on there, I think we have I had the Michigan flora on there, and that's about as complicated as it's going to get. If you definitely consider yourself a botany beginner, I would not start with that key because you will become incredibly frustrated and never want to ID plants again. And then the other one, huh?
Oh, I was just going to share that it frustrates me, and I feel like I have some experience.
I still feel pretty frustrated with it sometimes. I don't know many people that, you know, find them simple by any means. And the other one, so I am from Texas, so I'm just starting to get really familiar with the Michigan flora myself, and I'm still kind of learning the good field guides and things like that. And I just happened to, someone told me about this one the other day. So the Michigan trees, and that seems like a pretty good kind of, maybe probably a step up from this one. And it's gonna include more species in it, but not be as difficult as the Michigan flora one. And then if anyone has suggestions for field guides and stuff, let me know. I'm still collecting my Michigan collection, so.
I can send out, so Michigan wildflowers, now I know we just spent a lot of time telling you that flowers are limited, but this is a nice guide as well. I think it's put out by Cranbrook, Michigan wildflowers. And I would say the key is like of moderate difficulty, somewhere between NEWCOMB'S and Michigan flora. But sometimes actually I just flip through these plates and see if I can't find what I'm looking for. But it's nice, you know, what I like are the guides specific to Michigan, because they are, you know, you have more limited choices, and you know that what you're narrowing it down to is
going to be here.
Yeah.
Location is actually a pretty big part of identification as well. Sometimes you might not see all the exact characteristics exactly, but you also know that it's that species because of where it's growing. Because you know that a specific species isn't going to be found in that habitat. And now that Rachel said she really liked specific Michigan guides, I actually really like the Sibley's tree guide too. Having come up from Texas, it's been a good one for me because it also has the range maps to show where a specific species is located. So even though it's not specific to Michigan, it'll tell me if that tree has been found in Michigan.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully when I send out the email tomorrow, it'll make more sense, but feel free to email me if you have any questions for sure.
Yeah, and I think like as we are demonstrating, there are so many various approaches to field guides, and you know, different authors organize them differently, and so I think some of it is just what works for you. There are a lot of different approaches out there, and none of them are wrong. So yeah, I just feel like the longer I'm at this, the more and more field guides I amass.
That's basically how it works.
Yeah. All right, well, just a lot of thank yous. Oh, yes. So I neglected to do this, got excited about talking about plants, but Julie has shared a link to the feedback form in the chat box, and I think maybe Diana, you'll send that out, perhaps send out the link tomorrow with the follow-up info too.
Yes.
I think actually,
if you wanna fill it out now while it's fresh, feel free to do that too.
Yeah, we love to hear your feedback on these. So, yeah, definitely. So, you know, it's 8:10. I think we'll call it a wrap. I will turn off the recording, Diana, and I'll get that sent. That's another thing that we'll send in the follow-up too, right? I believe. So
we might not send the recording right away because sometimes we need to edit it, but it'll be up on our YouTube channel. We'll let you guys know.
Great.
Again.
Perfect. Thank you all.